All right. So, Ontario town forced by Human Rights Tribunal to pay LGBTQ group, they forgot the plus, group $10,000 after not honoring Pride Month. Mayor must give $5,000 of his own money. The Ontario Human Rights Tribunal is forcing the township of Emo and its mayor to compensate an LGBTQ activist group because elected officials refused to honor Pride Month in 2020. So they've been dragged through this Human Rights Tribunal for years now. Borderland Pride asked Emo to proclaim June 2020 as Pride Month and fly a rainbow pride flag for a week, but the mayor and council turned down the request, CBC News. Okay, so Borderline Pride has sued this town because they asked the town to do a Pride Month in 2020. The town says, no, we don't feel like it. The tribunal, whose rulings are legally binding, has determined that the township must pay Borderland Pride $10,000, and Mayor Harold McQuaker has to provide the group with $5,000 from his personal finances. So, human rights tribunals, what kinds of things do they get up to? Well, here's Mike Ward, who is a Canadian comedian. He's a Quebec comedian. He was put in front of a human rights tribunal, which lasted years, for a joke he made, for telling a joke that was politically incorrect. The complainant was awarded over $40,000. I think it was $42,000. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, $42,000 to Jeremy Gabriel for a joke. He's a comedian who made a joke. Human Rights Tribunal. You might say, well, how can you be forced to pay $42,000 for telling a joke? Well, let's see. In the context of Canadian Human Rights Tribunal courts, the principles of presumption of innocence and rules of evidence do not apply in the same manner as they do in criminal or civil courts. This is why I call it a kangaroo court. Rules of evidence. While the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal does not adhere to the strict rules of evidence like those found in criminal or civil courts, it still operates under some procedural fairness. The tribunal considers evidence presented by both parties, but the standards for admissibility and relevance might be less stringent compared to other courts. For instance, the tribunal might allow hearsay evidence or consider a broader range of evidence to understand the full context of discrimination claims. There is a general expectation of fairness in the right to present one's case, but this does not equate to the detailed evidentiary rules found in other legal settings. What this means is that there's not really rules. It comes down to, if it thinks that you've done something politically incorrect, that it doesn't agree with ideologically, you're guilty. That's it. You're done. Right? That's what it comes down to. How do we know this? Well, let me show you something. This approach was highlighted in criticisms regarding the tribunal's handling of cases, particularly under Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, where there was a noted 100% conviction rate. 100% conviction rate. How do you know that it's an ideological, it's a Soviet style, a kangaroo court, that it's just, these are show trials, that this is purely political? How do you know that? Because there's a 100% conviction rate. 100% conviction rate. 100%. Okay, that only happens when things are politicized. That's like the Soviet Union. That's like China, right? If you've committed some political crime, some politically incorrect crime, 100% conviction rate. How do you know it's all fake? How do you know it's all political? How do you know these are just a bunch of commissars enforcing ideological purity? Well, I can show you. 100% conviction rate. That's how you know. That's how you know it's all a joke. That's how you know it's utterly corrupt. That's how you know that it needs to be abolished. Let's see. So what do we have here? Guide to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which apparently is not worth the paper that it's written on. Any person charged with an offense has the right, D, to be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law in a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal. Presumed innocent. Presumption of innocence. Does not operate under a strict presumption of innocence. How is this even legal? Like, how does this exist? This is just dysfunction. This is progressive dysfunction. This is rigging things, right, to get your way. This is the leftist way. This is the far leftist authoritarian way. I mean, this has been around. Trudeau didn't create this. It's been around since the 70s, but it needs to be abolished. It needs to be gotten rid of. It's just a tool to abuse and oppress dissenters. That's it. Why do we need to put comedians through? I mean, eventually this case was overturned by the Supreme Court of Canada. It had to go up to the highest court in the land, and guess what? He only won it by a margin of 5-4. Razor thin. That's how close we are to the kind of authoritarianism that Trudeau really wants. Human rights tribunals are an abomination. They should go. He didn't do anything wrong. He offended somebody. That shouldn't be enough. And this shouldn't happen in Canada. Ontario town forced by Human Rights Tribunal to pay LGBTQ group $10,000 after not honoring Pride Month. So they wanted to force them to do something they didn't want to do. And because they didn't, the Human Rights Tribunal called it discrimination. So if you don't do what they want, you're discriminating against them. Why do the human rights tribunals need to be abolished again? This is Soviet Union. Doug Judson, who was lawyer and director of the Borderland Pride Board, said the decision is a real triumph for his organization. We didn't pursue this because of the money. We pursued this because we were treated in a discriminatory fashion by a municipal government. And municipalities have obligations under the Ontario Human Rights Code not to discriminate in the provision of a service. Well, we know that not just anybody can go up and demand that their Latvian heritage, there be a Latvian Pride Month, right? It's only one group. To say that it's discrimination, to not have to have people actively celebrating you, funded by taxpayers, right, who may not consent to any of this, right? This is lunacy. The tribunal's decision affirms that. This is the important thing we were seeking, was validation that as 2S LGBTQ plus A plus people, we're entitled to treatment without discrimination when we try to seek services from our local government. It's discrimination not to do what they want. To not celebrate them is discrimination now in Ontario. Just let that sink in. To further humiliate the mayor and the chief administrative officer of the township, the tribunal ordered both to enroll and complete. Oh my God, you can't believe this. To further humiliate the mayor and the chief administrative officer of the township, the tribunal ordered both to enroll and complete a Human Rights 101 indoctrination course from, guess who, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, within the next month. And I guess the lesson is, they say jump, you better jump, or else we're going to make it painful for you. Because it's not just the penalty, the financial, it's the process is the punishment as well, because you've got to spend money on the process as well. And if you're dealing with a court that has a 100% conviction rate every single time, right? You might feel like this is all some sort of cruel farce, I would say. Judson said the tribunal's decision sends a message to people in rural Ontario. This is happening in rural Ontario, that if they refuse to celebrate Pride Month, at their own risk. They want you to commit crimes against your own conscience. They want to force you to actively have to betray yourself for them. I hope that it emboldens and strengthens people in the communities like Emo and other places like that across Ontario to know that they have entitlements from their government, big daddy government. You know, this could all be turned against you as well, right? Having the government having these kinds of powers to compel people to do things, right? Could go. Have you not thought about that? Maybe it's best to just kind of let people do their own thing. Maybe that works out better. Have you considered that this could backfire in some way, because governments change, societies change, right? No, of course not. It is utterly baffling that anybody would think it would be a good idea to do this. But I guess if you're an ideologue, who is thoroughly parasitized by the woke mind virus, or you're just, you're just naturally a far leftist authoritarian, totalitarian, I guess. I don't know. But what are we to learn from this? So not having taxpayer-funded celebrations of you is discrimination in Canada now. If you're a certain group. Now, that doesn't apply to everybody, obviously. You have to wonder, isn't it discrimination against everybody else, against the people who didn't want to do this? Isn't it discrimination against them? Because the whole thing just seems kind of incoherent to me when you think about it that way, doesn't it? What isn't it discrimination against the people who don't get celebrated? Not just that don't want to do this, or you have their taxpayers spent doing this, but the people who don't get celebrated themselves, the people who don't get a month of celebration forced on everybody else, right? Isn't it? Again, the whole thing is kind of incoherent. You just kind of really do have to look at it through the lens of just far leftist totalitarianism. What about a month for the left-handed or gingers? This is just the Soviet Union. These lawyers are commissars. How else can you look at this? It's lunacy. The human rights tribunals are woke kangaroo courts, and their purpose is to enforce ideological purity. How could that be any more obvious? Right? Their purpose is to persecute heretics. That's it. I mean, what about religious freedom? How about that? Right? Well, how about the freedom over your own conscience, to not betray your own conscience? That seems like a fairly important one. That seems to be like a right that Western civilization used to understand, for God's sakes. I never had a flag for it, though, right? That's the problem, I guess. There was never a flag for not betraying your own conscience. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribing really helps me out. I thank you for that. I will see you next time.